All right, quick thumbs up. You can hear me? All right, let's go. So I think it's important to define first, like what is important part of the democratic process. So a big part of it being important is, if you look at the basic definition, is that it is of great significance or value, likely to have a profound effect on success, survival, or well-being. So what I'm gonna kind of gear it towards being important is that negative political ads tend to have great significance or effect, positive effect on the candidate's effort to so to speak, push a policy or be more successful in their platform, as shown by George Bush versus John Kerry. People tend to tune into more negative ads. Negative ads tend to be more policy based, while positive ads tend to be more on like the morals or the values of the candidate. Also, negative ads have a higher standard to be more intellectually honest because they're going to be under higher scrutiny by the media. And if they lie, it can boomerang and negatively damage their own arguments.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. I'm definitely going to agree to your definition, talking about how it's of great significance or value, likely to have a profound effect on success, survival, or well-being. The simple fact is negative political ads do not have a significant statistical effect on the outcome of political elections. Let's look at a couple of studies about this. The Journal of Politics in 2007 published a meta-study concluding that these negative political ads don't have a significant impact at all on the democratic process. It simply does not have a major effect on what's going on, the effect and the outcome of elections. Another study in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Politics concluded that any study showing any significant effect was outweighed or was countered by studies showing no significant effect. So basically what we can see is that the research is at best inconclusive and at worst decidedly against the importance of political ads. Now, one quick thing about these negative ads. They are often about character, such as the Romney killed my wife ads or this constant.
Let me pass it back to you.
Okay, yeah, the Romney killed my wife ads or the ad about, like, those ads about you have money overseas and that's a bad thing. That's what negative political ads often are. Passing the mic.
Okay, so often they can be, but the thing is with those negative political ads, they tend to bounce back on the own person. So if I made a political ad negatively and I was like, this person, like, eats cake too much, and it turns out they don't eat cake. This is a terrible example, but we're really speeding through it. It's going to bounce back on me because I'm a liar. So with negative political ads, you can make it more about policy, saying attacking that opponent, saying this is their policy, we disagree with it, we think that this policy is wrong, and so that things like that can be under higher scrutiny because if you're caught lying about that, then everyone's just going to attack you and bounce back on you. When I pass it back, I have a study for that.
Okay, so let's talk about this again. So my opponent comes back and tells us that there's higher scrutiny involved with these negative political ads. Now, I don't think that's really the case. Now, most of the negative political ads I see are not about policy, they're about the character, such as this senatorial candidate has money overseas in the Bahamas, that's a bad thing. You talk about the Romney killed my wife ad from 2012. Now, my opponent said that these bounce back and hurt the people, but that simply isn't true statistically. Now, I've given the example of the two meta studies, concluding that the studies show no significant political effect, no importance to these political ads on the outcome of the election. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about an important outcome. So this political ads, I think, statistically have been shown not to be important to the outcome of any elections.
Okay, so I want to look at the John Kerry Bush election. There was a political ad that was negatively ran in 2004 that was mainly going about how John Kerry had inflated his truth about his military record in Vietnam. Now, John Kerry didn't respond to it very well at all, and it took him about 3 years to actually come out with a true response to it. But many political activists, a guy by the name of Harvey Goldstein, wrote about how it wasn't the significant loss to his debate, but it was a huge impact because this negative that was run, it was a pretty fair, and because he had no opposition to it, he couldn't respond to that attack. Voters were less likely to vote for him. As to those studies, they tend to be inconclusive. Most of the studies that I could find, including those Harvard ones, I saw that.
Okay, so a couple of points quickly. So let's talk first about the 2004 election. Now, I have a study here from the American Journal of Political Science in 2011, which says that based on study from the 2004 and elections from 1976 to 2000, negativity actually demobilizes voters in the cases where they have when they've chosen a candidate and they have a lot of negative political ads about that candidate. So basically, it says that all these negative political ads, if you've chosen a candidate already and you see a bunch of negative political ads about them, you're less likely to turn out and actually vote at all. So this actually is demobilizing people. That's harming voter turnout, and that's something that's not important. That's the kind of thing we don't want in our political process. And secondly, the point about my opponent's mention of the studies is actually saying my response to this whole argument is that inconclusive means not important. If there's not inconclusive proof that these things are actually important for the democratic process, then we can't conclude that the resolution is true.
Okay, so I agree that the research on this is very inconclusive, and it's hard to crack down on, because it's hard to like look at a person. Like, these studies have been very hard for them to find. Did this negative ad cause the impact? Well, a lot of different factors come into it. But I refer to the analogy of like a 7th grade fight. When there's like a fight in the back of school, you're gonna go see it because it's conflict, it's clashing. So these advertisements are gonna get a lot more attention. They're gonna bring more viewership and just overall attention towards this candidate versus this candidate on their policies. It's been shown to stimulate it, and whether or not I don't have the studies to disprove that, so I'm going to let that one stand. But whether or not it's immobile and whether or not it's immobilizing the voter, well, if it's been immobilized, well, then you could argue that that's kind of what the opposition wants, and so they have achieved their important goal, so to speak.
Okay, so let's talk about those issues again. So my opponent first talks about there's this whole idea that the negative political ads are going to bring more voters, talk more about policies. Now, the problem is this isn't the negative ads that I'm actually seeing when I'm watching television. The negative ads I see are the ads that just show Hillary Clinton referring to Donald Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables over and over again for like 30 seconds. That's the kind of thing I see. It's an attack on character, not an attack on policy. My opponent then talks about the whole idea that there's this inconclusive impact. And again, we have to talk about the burden of proof here. In order to agree with the resolution that these negative political ads are an important part of the democratic process, we have to see proof. We have to see conclusive evidence that they are. We don't see that. The statistics, at best, are inconclusive for my opponent, meaning we can't affirm the resolution based on basic principles of the burden of proof in debate. So that's the big issue here. We haven't seen the proof, we haven't seen the evidence that these actually have an important impact and that they're actually significant for the democratic process.
Okay, so a huge part about this is whether or not it's inconclusive data. From a logical perspective, on a policy of, if you're a politician trying to promote yourself, you wouldn't be going for political ads, negative political ads, if you believe that the data was inconclusive at best, harmful at worst. That wouldn't be a wise move. So why would these politicians constantly be running these negative ads if it's not proven to them and to other politicians to be pushing for these ads? You yourself said that, like, when I watch these TVs, that's kind of purely anecdotal evidence, and so I'm not really going to count that, but we'll move on.
Okay, so let's talk about that. My opponent says that we should be looking at the logical perspective involved in here, and we shouldn't be talking just about the data. But the problem is, first of all, if there is a logical support that proves that these negative political ads should work, then we should see that in the mountains of data we have concluded on this project. We should simply see the logical impact of this in the actual evidence involved. That's what logic would demand, of course. Secondly, he says that why would politicians be running these? Now, the thing is, I don't understand this. Like, are we actually asking why politicians are doing something irrational? Like, politicians do irrational stuff all the time. I mean, yeah, they get paid, the money gets paid for these things. I don't see that that disproves the fact that they aren't a significant impact on the political process.
My opponent, I want to point towards one of the earliest elections that we ever had. I think it was John Adams versus Jefferson, and I believe that John Adams ran an ad that that Jefferson was dead and you shouldn't vote for him. Now, I'm not arguing the morality of it, but it significantly impacted the vote of that one. But as far as other things, the whole politicians are all irrational, that's kind of an ad hominem slam against politicians. From a logical perspective, these campaigners are going, we need to make ads. We have to funnel money into these ads. So they want to funnel money into the most successful ads, which they believe are negative.
Okay, so the big point that we have here is the statistics versus the fact that politicians use these. Now, I think the statistics speak for themselves, but even if they don't, politicians do irrational stuff all the time. This is a tradition of negative political ads that's not just going to be wiped away because somebody looks at studies. It's just a tradition that can